The summer of 2020 in Tucson, Arizona was unrelenting. The sun scorched the asphalt, sending waves of heat shimmering above the streets, while cacti stood sentinel along dusty sidewalks. On a quiet corner of 4th Avenue, Cactus Corner diner clung to its place in the world, its faded wooden sign creaking in the occasional breeze. The neon open sign flickered like a heartbeat, and inside, the scent of fresh coffee, sizzling bacon, and slightly burnt toast promised a kind of timeless comfort. This was Maria Elena Vasquez's domain, a 26-year-old waitress whose warm smile and quick wit made her the heart of the diner. Maria wasn't one for chasing grand dreams. Her ambitions were grounded, practical. Pay off the $22,000 in student loans from her unfinished sociology degree at the University of Arizona, save enough to take her mother, Rosa, on a modest vacation to San Diego, and maybe, one day, return to college. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood on Tucson's south side, Maria had learned early that life demanded resilience. Her father, Javier, had walked out when she was 6, leaving Rosa to raise Maria and her younger brother, Diego, on a seamstress's meager wages. Maria had always been the responsible one, taking babysitting jobs at 14, then waitressing through high school to help with rent. College had been her shot at something bigger, but when Rosa's arthritis worsened, Maria dropped out after 2 years to work full-time. Dreams could wait. Family couldn't. Cactus Corner was more than a job, it was a second home. The diner's red vinyl booths, cracked but cozy, had seen decades of stories unfold. Its regulars were as much a part of the place as the jukebox that only played half its songs. There was Old Man Jenkins, who grumbled about the news but always wanted his eggs over easy. Sarah, a nursing student who tipped in quarters and studied in the corner booth, and Mrs. Delgado, who came every Sunday for pancakes and gossip. Maria knew their orders by heart, their quirks by instinct. She moved through the diner with ease, balancing plates, refilling coffee, and tossing banter that kept the mood light. But one patron stood out, a man who'd started coming in a few months ago, always at the same time, 3 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He'd shuffle to the corner booth, his faded gray coat draped over his thin frame despite the desert heat, and order the cheapest item on the menu, a $3 bowl of vegetable soup with a glass of water. His face was weathered, with deep lines carved around his eyes, a graying beard that needed trimming, and hands that trembled slightly as he ate. He rarely spoke beyond a polite "thank you," and his tip was always exactly $1, left in neatly stacked coins. Maria called him the regular in her mind, though she didn't know his name. There was a quiet sadness in his eyes, a weight that made her wonder about his story. Maria had a knack for reading people. Growing up, she'd watched her mother navigate hardship with grace, always finding a way to share what little they had. A plate of tamales for a neighbor, $1 for a struggling friend. Rosa's lessons stuck with Maria. Kindness wasn't about what you had, it was about what you gave. So Maria made it her mission to brighten the regulars' visits. She'd linger a moment longer when refilling his water, offer a smile that said, "You're seen," and sometimes slip an extra cracker packet onto his tray. He never asked for more, but she sensed he needed it. One blistering August afternoon, as the diner's ancient air conditioner wheezed, the regular shuffled in, his coat more tattered than usual. Maria noticed his shoes, worn sneakers with soles peeling like old paint, and the way he winced as he sat, as if his bones ached. She set down his water. "Soup today, sir?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. "Yes, please." As she turned to the kitchen, Maria's heart tugged. She'd seen poverty before. Her own family had scraped by on rice and beans some months, but the regular's quiet dignity struck her. He wasn't begging, wasn't complaining, he was just existing, and it felt wrong to let him fade into the background. That day, after he finished his soup and left his $1 tip, Maria made a choice. She slipped into the kitchen, where Hector, the cook, was flipping burgers, his apron stained with grease. "Hector, can you make a turkey sandwich to go? I'll cover it." Hector raised an eyebrow, his mustache twitching. "You're too soft, Maria, but sure, I got you." Maria wrapped the sandwich in foil, added a slice of apple pie from the day's leftovers, and tucked it into a paper bag. When the regular paid his bill, she handed him the bag with a casual smile. "A little extra for the road." His eyes widened, and for a moment she thought he'd refuse. But he took the bag, his fingers brushing the paper. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than usual. Maria caught a glimmer of something, gratitude, maybe relief, before he turned and left. This became their ritual. Every visit, Maria slipped something extra into his bag. A muffin, a bag of chips, a slice of pecan pie, always paid for from her own tips. She didn't tell anyone. Not even her best friend, Carla, who worked the evening shift and had a knack for gossip. It wasn't about credit. It was about giving the regular a moment of warmth in a world that seemed to have turned cold on him. Weeks stretched into months, and Maria learned bits and pieces about the regular, whose name, she discovered, was Edward. One slow afternoon, as she refilled his water, he mentioned he'd been a high school history teacher years ago, though he didn't say where. Another time, he let slip that he lived in a boarding house on the edge of town, one of those crumbling places with peeling paint and creaky stairs. Maria pieced together that he was alone, with no family, and his health was failing. His cough, a dry, rattling sound, grew worse, and she noticed he ate more slowly, as if each bite took effort. Maria's own life wasn't easy. Her student loans loomed, with interest piling up like sand in a storm. Rosa's arthritis had worsened, making it harder for her to sew, and Diego, now 19, was struggling to find steady work after high school. Maria's shifts at Cactus Corner barely covered rent, groceries, and the occasional doctor's visit for Rosa. But she never let her worries spill over at work. The diner was her sanctuary, and Edward, in his quiet way, had become part of it. In October, Edward came in looking frailer than ever. His face was gaunt, his coat hung loosely, and his hands shook so badly he spilled his water. Maria's concern deepened. After his meal, she did something she'd never done before. She slid into the booth across from him. "Edward, are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "Is there anything I can do?" He looked at her, his eyes tired but kind. "You're already doing more than you know, Maria," he said, his voice hoarse. "My wife, Ellen, used to love diners like this. She'd order pie and talk to everyone. She's been gone 2 years now, and it's been hard. Bills pile up, you know?" Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to ask about the bills, about his health, but Edward stood, leaving his dollar tip and the empty bag from last week's pie. "You're a good soul," he said before walking out. That night, Maria lay awake in her small apartment, the hum of the city filtering through her window. Edward's words echoed in her mind. She thought of Rosa, who'd once sold her wedding ring to pay for Maria's school books, and of Diego, who hid his frustration behind a tough exterior. Maria knew what it was like to feel buried under life's weight, and she couldn't shake the image of Edward alone in that boarding house. The next day, she hatched a plan. During a lull at the diner, she pulled Hector and Carla aside. "I want to help Edward," she said, her voice steady. "He's got medical bills, and I think we can do something. Maybe a collection from the staff?" Hector scratched his beard, skeptical but warm. "Maria, you're always playing hero, but I'm in. I'll toss in $20. Carla, who'd seen Edward's frail figure, nodded. "Count me in. Let's keep it quiet, though. He's not the type to want to fuss." Maria started a discreet collection, passing a coffee can among the staff. She contributed $50 from her own savings, a sacrifice that meant skipping her weekly coffee with Carla and cutting back on groceries. Over 2 weeks, they raised $320. Not enough to solve Edward's problems, but enough to make a difference. Maria wrote a note to go with the money. "From your friends at Cactus Corner. You're not alone." When Edward came in next, Maria slipped the envelope into his to-go bag, along with a slice of pecan pie. She watched nervously as he opened it outside, standing under the diner's awning. His hands trembled as he read the note, and he looked back through the window, catching her eye. Maria braced herself, worried he'd be offended, but Edward gave her a small, grateful nod before disappearing into the dusk. For a while, things seemed brighter. Edward's cough eased, and he even smiled once, a rare, fleeting thing that warmed Maria's heart. She felt a quiet pride, knowing she'd helped, even if just a little. But in late November, Edward stopped coming. At first, Maria thought he was sick or had moved. She asked around at the boarding house, but the manager, a gruff man with a cigarette habit, said Edward had cleared out without details. Days turned into weeks, and Maria's worry grew. Had he gotten worse? Had he left Tucson? Or worse? Life at Cactus Corner marched on. Maria worked her shifts, laughed with regulars, and tried to focus on the present. But every time she passed Edward's booth, her chest tightened. She kept his last to-go bag, folded neatly in her locker, as if holding on to it could bring him back. Rosa noticed her daughter's quiet moods and asked, "Mia, what's wrong?" But Maria only shook her head, not wanting to burden her mother. In early January 2021, as Tucson shivered under a rare cold snap, Maria was wiping down counters when a man in a suit entered the diner. He was in his 50s, with neatly combed hair and a briefcase that looked out of place among the diner's worn charm. "I'm looking for Maria Vasquez," he said, his voice formal. Maria, wiping her hands on her apron, stepped forward. "That's me. Can I help you?" The man introduced himself as Robert Klein, an attorney. He asked to speak privately, so Maria led him to a booth, her stomach nodding. Lawyers didn't visit diners for good news. "Is this about my loans?" she asked, half joking. Robert shook his head, his expression softening. "No, Maria. I'm here about Edward Thompson." Maria's breath caught. "Edward? Is he okay?" "I'm sorry," Robert said gently. "Edward passed away last month. Cancer. He'd been fighting it for years, but it took him quickly at the end." Maria's eyes filled with tears. She'd feared this, but the words hit like a stone. I didn't know he was that sick." "He didn't want people to know," Robert said, "but he spoke of you often in his last weeks. He said you made his days bearable." Maria swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "He was a good man. I just wish I could have done more." Robert smiled faintly, reaching into his briefcase. "That's why I'm here. Edward left something for you." He slid an envelope across the table. Maria opened it, expecting a letter. Instead, she found a legal document and a check. Her jaw dropped at the amount. $50,000. What is this?" she stammered, her hands shaking. "Edward had a small estate," Robert explained. "He was a retired professor, and though he lived modestly, he'd saved carefully. In his will, he left you this sum. He also wrote you a letter." Maria unfolded the letter, her vision blurring as she read, "Dear Maria, you'll never know how much your kindness meant to an old man who'd lost his way. When Ellen died, I thought the world had nothing left for me. Your smile, your food, your heart, they reminded me there was still good out there. You gave me more than pie or money. You gave me dignity. This is my way of saying thank you. Use it to chase your dreams, Maria. You deserve them. Yours, Edward." Maria sobbed, clutching the letter. Robert waited patiently, then added, "He also asked me to tell you he was at peace in the end, thanks to you." Maria's mind reeled. $50,000 was more money than she'd ever seen. She thought of Edward in his worn coat, eating his $3 soup, never hinting at savings or a past as a professor. He'd been invisible to the world, but he'd seen her, and now he'd changed her life. The news spread through Cactus Corner like wildfire. Hector whooped, slamming his spatula on the grill. Carla hugged Maria so tightly she nearly fell over. Even old man Jenkins, usually gruff, teared up when Carla told him. Maria was overwhelmed, not just by the money but by Edward's gratitude. She thought of him as a lonely regular, but he'd seen her as a lifeline. That night, Maria sat with Rosa at their kitchen table, the letter between them. Rosa, her hands gnarled from arthritis, read it slowly, her eyes shining. "Mia, this is a blessing," she said, "but it's also a responsibility. Use it wisely." Maria nodded, already planning. First, she paid off her student loans, lifting a weight that had pressed on her for years. She enrolled part-time at the University of Arizona, determined to finish her degree and become a social worker, helping others like Edward. She set aside $10,000 for Rosa's medical care, ensuring her mother could see a specialist for her arthritis. With the rest, she started a fund at Cactus Corner called Edward's Table, offering free meals to those in need. The first meal went to a young mother who'd come in with 2 kids and not enough cash. Maria served them pancakes, her heart full. Maria never forgot Edward. She framed his letter and hung it in her apartment, a reminder that small acts of kindness could ripple outward. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m., she'd glance at his booth, half expecting to see him. And when she graduated 3 years later, walking across the stage in her cap and gown, she looked out at Rosa and Diego in the crowd and felt Edward's presence too. Edward's gift wasn't just money, it was a lesson. Maria had given him dignity in his darkest days, and he'd given her a future. In a world that often felt harsh, their story was a quiet miracle, proof that kindness could change everything.